Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 1987 Lucio Fulci film Aenigma, and this is one I've been meaning to get to for a while. Shudder had dumped onto its service in October 3 Fulci films that I had never seen, so that's why I'm reviewing them now, because I'd like to see as much Fulci as possible in my lifetime. Just, I'm a little slow to get to it. But the interesting thing is, all three of those Fulci films are having to do with possession, including Aenigma, so it's very interesting to just see that common theme. I guess, directors get stuck in certain things. By the way, Fulci is on this shirt, spelling out Giallo. Down here, Fulci. Nice. All right, let's get into it. Directed by Lucio Fulci, like I said, who's also done A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, Don't Torture a Duckling, Zombie, The New York Ripper, and A Cat in the Brain, just to name a few. He's done a lot more than that. This one's written by Fulci as well as Giorgio Mariuzzo, who also wrote scripts for The Beyond, The House by the Cemetery, Interrobang, which looked like it was erotic based, and The Shameless, just to name a few. Now, apparently, Fulci acknowledged that this film was inspired by the De Palma film Carrie, but personally, I feel like I see some of the Carrie in it because of the, school-aged girl outcast revenge aspect to it, but I'd say it's more Carrie mixed with Patrick, for very obvious reasons if you've seen Patrick, that someone in a coma doing things with their mind, in essence. Although in this case, it seems like it's not so much with her mind as it is with her soul, because we have that whole thing where her soul is leaving her body, which is shot in a really cool way, in my opinion. So starting this film out with a shot of an eye, very Fulci, like I just talked about in the Manhattan Baby review, very focused on shooting eyes. There was something that was happening in Italian cinema in general in the past, because, window to the soul and all that stuff. But Fulci did it a lot, and he starts the movie out that way, so I was like, this is very fitting for Fulci. The intro song is very 80s cheese. The acting is as well, but that's, a lot of that comes from the English dubbing, typically, although, I don't know, maybe the Italian acting wasn't that great anyway. But this points to, another issue that comes up with films like this, and I talked about it a little bit in Manhattan Baby. It's hard to know how much of, poorly written lines or poorly delivered lines, how much of that is actually original script or actual translation versus how much of it is, the rough dubbing. Because you need to remember with these films, when they're dubbing in English, they have to fit just the time frame of what a character is saying within that, time frame of when the mouth is moving. So they're not necessarily going to be able to say the exact thing that the translation of the Italian would be. So it creates this thing where you're just I don't know if this was poorly written dialogue or ridiculous dialogue in the script, or if this is just because of the dubbing. But the whole dubbing thing just adds extra charm to these types of films. When stupid high school pranks go awry, someone ends up in a coma. It is one of those typical things where it's prank goes awry, person is in bad shape because of it, now they're seeking revenge. This has been done in films a decent amount of times. It's not just Carrie, but a decent amount of times. Probably a lot inspired by Carrie, to be honest, because of how good that film was. Still is. The length of the flatlining noise in this film is extremely unnecessary and beyond annoying. When Kathy is in the hospital and she's flatlining, which initially I'm like, okay, she's flatlining, she's dead now. But then she's back later and she's just in a coma, and they kept her hooked up to the machines for over a day while she goes and possesses the body of Eva and has at least one full day in school, in her boarding school. So I don't know what they were going for there. Was that just supposed to be that she was brain dead at that point? I'm assuming that's what it was supposed to be. But they showed multiple monitors that were flatlining, and I think they stayed flatlining. But anyway, that was confusing. But my point being, the noise of the flatline went on way too long. I'm very sensitive to stuff like that because I have dealt with tinnitus for some time, and sometimes it's really bad and sometimes it's not so bad. Right now, it's not very bad, but there are times where it's really bad. So hearing noises like that sounds a lot like tinnitus, And yeah, I cannot deal with that. It like is at a point where it hurts my ears. So when there's sustained noise like that, it's ridiculous. But then there's no need for it to be that sustained. And that was done in Manhattan Baby a bit too. But anyway, just like a little pet peeve of mine. Interesting how they shot Kathy's soul leaving her body, the kind of panning up and then going through the ceiling of the room, then showing the floor of the next room and then panning up and going to the ceiling again. I think they did that for like 2 full rooms. Cool idea. It definitely gives you the idea that her, soul is leaving her body. And then obviously at the very end of the film, when she does like fully die, they do that again, and it's not just inside the building at that point. It goes outside of the building and is like way above the hospital. So I thought that was a cool way that they decided to shoot that. I guess they didn't want to have a big reveal that Kathy is inhabiting Eva's body, because they reveal it basically as soon as they show Eva as a character. I would have thought that if they were going to do something like this, they'd wait to reveal it and be like, why is Eva acting so oddly? Oh no, big twist. She's actually inhabited by the spirit or being controlled by Kathy, who's in a coma. No, they're just immediately like, yeah, this is Kathy, really. And it's like, you don't get to see who Eva actually is as a person prior to that. It's weird. Fred is a handsy aerobics instructor. Yup, that's Italian cinema. A lot of that type of stuff in these old Italian horror films, or just old Italian film in general, is these really handsy dudes who are in positions to be very close to younger women. Yeah, it's gross nowadays for sure. I guess it didn't play as gross back then, but gross now. So is Mary the cleaning lady also possessed? Because her eyes ended up turning red. The creepy cleaning lady who just keeps popping up randomly all the time, like, I don't know if she just, like, has some extra powers, because in the end she shows up and actually saves the day, but it's like, I couldn't figure out what they were trying to do with her. Because for a bit I was like, oh, is she also being controlled by Kathy? Is Kathy also, like, controlling her body or inhabiting her body sometimes? I don't know. So I'm a little confused about that. If anyone has a theory, let me know in the comments. I don't think it's hospital protocol to keep a dead body on life support for over a day or so. Like I said, it looked like everything flatlined, and it kept flatline. Just saying. Maybe I missed it. I don't know. Fred being strangled by his mirror double ends up showing that Kathy has extra abilities. After that, it kind of gives you the idea that, like, nothing is off the table. She could do anything. She could make people hallucinate. She could conjure a double to kill you, stuff like that. But it also ends up seeming, with the way a lot of the stuff plays out, that she's messing with their minds to a degree, because when they determine that Fred is dead, well, they determine that he had a heart attack, which would not be the case if he was actually physically strangled. It would be strangulation. So that's why I started thinking, okay, so he actually did die of a heart attack, most likely. It's just he was frightened to death in essence and not actually physically strangled. Just saying. That's my theory on it. I like how Mary keeps randomly showing up and she's cleaning things in the creepiest way possible. I already talked about her randomly showing up and being creepy, but she's always like cleaning something in a creepy way. Like, my favorite was the pillar. Because it's like, she was like really scrubbing this pillar. And it's like, does a pillar need to be scrubbed? First of all, does it need to be scrubbed at all? Second of all, does it need to be scrubbed that much? And she's just always looking creepy. And sickly. She also looks sickly. I've never seen so many snails in one place. Pretty gross. And then it's even more gross when Virginia's covered in the snails. Something that I personally, if I needed to be in this film, would not be able to lay still for. Let's be honest. Like, just imagining the feeling of a bunch of probably cold, slimy snails just crawling all over your body and you're supposed to be totally still. I don't even want to imagine how long she had to have them on her body to get that shot. It's crazy. And it's a lot of them. I mean, I thought it was a lot initially when they just show them all covering the bed, and then they take it further and they're all over her. And I guess in that instance, she ends up being suffocated by them, because we do see the one that's actually in her mouth at one point, which looks like it was actually a fake one. All the other ones were real. So I guess the insinuation was that she choked on a snail. But here's the thing: why didn't she just get up? I mean, I guess maybe like the soul or the telekinetic powers of Kathy were holding her down, maybe like adding weight to the snails. I don't know. But just having those snails on her would not keep her there. She would actually jump up and actually go somewhere. So it was a little ridiculous. But here's the thing. In Fulci films, a lot of the times you have one of these big ridiculous moments, much like in Manhattan Baby when they have the taxidermied bird attack, which the snails was kind of interesting and fun, but the taxidermied bird attack I like even more. That was a good one. You really think the doctor would put the deaths at the school and Kathy's brain activity together? Do you really think that would happen, Dr. Anderson? He's just like, he immediately, it takes like no time, he's immediately like, her brain activity is going up when these kids are dying. He would not be that, keyed into what's going on at the school and make that connection. Like, convenience of writing. It's a thing. Like Eva's possessed freak out where she's throwing stuff and swinging all over with the pillow, there are some odd camera sequences, camera angles used during that sequence, which, I think helps to capture that kind of craziness of the moment, that kind of, it mirrors to a degree like the out of control nature that she's going through at that point, because literally she's not in control of her body. She is possessed. So like it is out of control. And it's cool that they mirror it with their camera movements and angles. Real quick, pause for horror hydration. You should do the same. Stay hydrated. It's good for you. I didn't see Dr. Anderson trying to stop Eva from kissing him when she had passed out. And later, he doesn't really rebuff her advances. She comes at him hard. She's like, I want to be with you. Since she's at a boarding school, I think she's like high school age is my guess here. Nasty. And he's like obviously at least in his 30s at this point. So it's nasty. It's gross. It's gross. He's a gross dude. And everyone seems to be fine with it too. Like her friends, the person who I think is like the dean of the school is just kind of like, oh yeah, like you're just dating students, because he then moves on to Jenny too. Like, gross. Plus, if you're there to like help someone out who's having a medical situation, aren't you supposed to be a professional and not kiss them? Like, I'm asking questions here, people. I'm not a doctor. The scene with the severed arm and the blood popping out of the painting, really cool. That sequence I really did like. It draws on for quite a while, when Grace is in the museum and she's kind of by herself wandering around in the dark. But they end up putting enough interesting things in, like the skeleton reveal, the snake that's there, the severed head that appears that's being held by the statue, and then obviously the painting, which is my favorite, where they have like the knife drop and then like an actual severed arm like falls out of the painting, and then there's blood oozing through it and splattering on Grace's face. Totally cool. Love that stuff. And then she ends up getting killed by a statue, which that didn't look the best. I wish they would have come up with something more interesting for her death, but certainly wasn't the stupidest death. I'll talk about that in a bit. The Eva and Dr. Anderson sex scene looks odd even before the weird camera work and scratching and biting starts. And it's but it does make sense because it ends up being a nightmare. And it's most likely Anderson's premonition that there's something actually wrong with Eva. That's what I assume this nightmare is supposed to insinuate, that he's getting these inklings that there's something else going on with Eva at this point. Therefore, nightmare sex. But that's a really weird scene, especially before you know it's a nightmare. You're just like, what are we doing here? Because they're oiled up at some point, too. Like, they are oiled up in some of those shots. Interesting. Eva leaves the school, and immediately Dr. Anderson starts dating Jenny. This dude is gross. And I like how they have Eva reading her love letter as they're showing him going out and doing things with Jenny. And their love is blossoming, basically. Not into it. Really nasty. But they spend a good amount of time in this film, and it really doesn't have much bearing on the actual story with like this courting stuff that's going on with Anderson. First with Eva and then with Jenny, and it's like, you're not really adding much. Do we need this right now? It is funny how fake Tommy's headless body looks. I will say that. Also, I didn't understand. Maybe someone can throw out their theory on this. When she sees Tommy's headless body, which he's not actually headless at that point, but ends up becoming headless. Then she freaks out. She starts running around and she's opening all these other doors in the building, and every one she looks into, it looks like it's the same body. So was it a situation where she's being tricked into every room she goes into is actually her room, so she is seeing Tommy's headless body the whole time? Or is she being tricked into seeing that every single person who's there has had their head removed? Because if that's the case, they used the same fake body that looks terrible for every single one of them, and that's just ridiculous, in my opinion. So, just throwing it out there. Kim's death is by far the most lame death. I mean, just falling out of a window. Really? I mean, Fred's wasn't great because he just gets strangled, but leading up to it's more interesting. She just like, well, I guess the severed head scaring her, but she just falls out of the window, and it's just like, okay. But then we do get that little nice surprise of Tommy looking out the window, and then his head gets chopped off. And it is funny and cool that his head just kind of lands next to her body there. I like that touch. That was nice. The moaning and grunting in the dark hospital when Jenny is there alone is pretty funny. I was like, what is going on here? It sounded sexual, for sure. Also sounded like the person could have been in the bathroom at the same time. Like, it was just this weird mix. And I was just like, this is a choice. This is a choice. Small thing, but when they focus on Jenny's eyes, all I can see is how her left eye is considerably higher on her face than her right eye. I know it's not super common for people's eyes to be actually perfectly symmetrical. It's very common that people's are not, but it's varying degrees. And when they do like a close-up of her eyes, I just, like, all I could see is that her left eye was so much higher than her right eye. And then I was just distracted from there on out whenever they're showing Jenny. Just a personal thing. I like how they slowly take the music down for the scene when Eva freezes and then ends up passing out in slow motion. I think that was a really effective thing to do to kind of capture the moment and how things are really going. And also it's kind of like an inside glimpse into what's happening with her. Because the music starts like coming down, it's slowing down, it's getting deeper in its sound. And as she's kind of like freezing and then, you know, slowly falling to the ground. So Mary saves the day by taking Kathy off of all of her life-supporting mechanisms. I really did not see that coming as the end to the film. I just thought that Mary was kind of there as either like a toy of Kathy's, or it was just a quirky character. Because a lot of older Italian films, especially horror, would just throw in these weird, random, quirky characters who didn't really matter to the film. But I always liked that. Then in the end, we get the cheesy song back from the beginning that's playing during the credits. Kind of warmed up to it at that point. Not in the sense of, like, I'm actually digging this, but in the sense of it's like, I like it because it's terrible type thing. It's so bad it's good type song. Very cheesy. Very cheesy. As usual, some really good camera work in this film. I mean, Fulci, you know, even if you get a film that has a not great story, or it's not all that great in its execution, it's going to look good because Fulci has known what he's doing for quite some time, especially by 1987. So looks good. Some really cool camera movements, some really cool camera angles, some interesting ideas, some like inspired shots. So directing and cinematography is actually good. It's obviously a possession film, but it's also about revenge and bullies kind of getting their comeuppance. So, you know, it's just rolling those two overly used things together. But I mean, it works to some level, and, you know, I enjoyed it a little bit as, like, a so bad it's good type film, so I'll rate it in those two ways. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play as, like, a straight-up movie, I can give it, like, 2 stars, but as a so bad it's good film, I can give it 3. Yeah, 3 stars on that one, but yeah. I mean, it's interesting, and I'd be really interested to hear what other people have to say about it. I know this is a Severin release, so I might consider, if I get like a gift card for Christmas, I might consider purchasing that as one of the films I get. Yeah. I think they might have a slipcover for it, too. I'm not 100% on that. But anyway, in the comments, tell me what you think about this film. Tell me, like it, hate it, in between. Give me like a sentence or two telling me why. And do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It is quick, painless, costs you nothing, and I greatly appreciate it. It is your best way to repay me if you like this video or any video I've ever done, which I've done a lot. And speaking of that, if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos, hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting them up. And I'm doing at least 4 a week at this point. So putting in work for all of you and myself, because I have a good time doing it. But anyway, thanks for taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.